Working for you. A weekly talk radio program which highlights developments of national interest and the activities of your St. Kitts Nevis government. Join host Lesroy Williams as he presents news, views, reports, and interviews about everything regarding the activities of the Team Unity government and the building of our communities and the development of St. Kitts Nevis. Tune in and call in to interact with your government and share your views regarding the upward forward development of your community and our beautiful Twin Island Federation. Working for You is weekly, every Wednesday live from 1:30 p.m. to 3 p.m. on ZIZ Radio, Win FM, and Sugar City FM with rebroadcast on participating stations. Working for You.
Good afternoon, and I welcome you to Working for You. I am Lesroy Williams. Today we are going to be discussing something that is extremely important to our development as a society, as a people, and that is our culture. I have with me officials from the Ministry of Culture, the Department of Culture. I have with me Mr. Stanley Knight, who is the Permanent Secretary, Mr. Troy Mills, who is the Director in the Department of Culture, and very shortly we will be joined by Miss Marlene Phillips, who is head of the Research and Documentation Unit and St. Kitts' lead on intangible cultural heritage activities within the Department of Culture. She will join us shortly. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you. Now, culture is such a broad term. It's very broad.
That is true.
And it has multiple definitions, all of which we cannot delve in on this program. But I would like you, for the audience, to define culture in the most basic way so that people can understand.
I normally say culture is the way of life of a people. I don't think that perhaps we could go too much simpler than that. It is everything about us. Generations gone, generations present, generations to come. What we have been doing, how we do what we do. And it involves basically everything. The dress, the food, the intangible elements of it, the folklore, etc. The tangible elements as well. And I don't believe it could really be put any simpler than the way of life of a people.
Okay, good. I would say not way, but I would make it plural. I would say the ways of life of a people, because there's more than one way. And so therefore we can talk about cultural diversity, which I think we will get into, because there's more than one way of doing things.
Correct.
And in the plurality of the 21st century, very often within a federation, there is more than a people.
There is also more than a people.
Right. So that we right.
Because
So
we live in a plural society.
correct.
And we have it's a diverse culture, diverse peoples, diverse ways of worship and dress and food and all of that sort of a thing. So I wouldn't say way.
Ways.
I know that once ago it was the way, but it's really correct to say the ways of the people.
Yes.
Because we are a multicultural society.
We are a multicultural society. Multicultural, multi-religious, and so on. Marlene,
Hello.
welcome.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
I introduced you before
Okay.
and told them that you were on your way.
Thank you.
So they were expecting you. And we were just talking about culture, and that is such a broad term and with multiple definitions. But we try to capture it. People say the way, as Mr. Mills was saying, the way of life of a people, but I told him it's the ways of life. Because there's more than one way.
Definitely.
But perhaps you can tell me, how relevant is culture?
We can't live without culture.
How is
We're-
culture relevant?
It's relevant because culture is a part of us. Humanity, societies define their culture. Okay? So culture has different elements in it that express a society's tradition and customs, and it manifests itself through the performing arts, the visual arts, through writing, spoken word, through performance of traditional practices, music. It's basically the way a people live.
So
And
it's
what
who
the-
we are
It's who you are. It's your identity.
and our identity.
Yes, it's what you eat, the traditional things that your parents raised you on, that their parents raised them on, and it's handed down through tradition. It's things that a society values, that's a part of that defines what their culture is.
Is it our identity, or is it what shapes our identity?
Culture is your identity, but however, it's not stagnant. It's
Not static.
constantly changing and
Dynamic.
evolving. However, when you're speaking about traditional customs of a society, it's what the society keeps repeating. So for example, an easy example is folklore for St. Kitts and Nevis. Was Christmas sports back in the 1700s and has evolved into being a part of carnival, a part of the culture of the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. And our elders would know what those performances were like, what things were said, how it was expressed when they recited certain prose during, like the mummies or masquerade and during performances. However, we fast forward now and we're in 2018. During those years, we have a young generation that has grown up with knowing what folklore is about. However, it's a modern time. They're into modern music. They see different visuals. Technology brings us images from all over the world. We've got migration, people from other ethnicities and cultures and backgrounds coming to live here. So yes, definitely, all of those things are impacting and influencing the generation. So they're eventually going to manifest themselves through the art form. So I say all of that to say that we can't stop culture from evolving. However, the Department of Culture, it's part of our job to document as much as possible the cultural tradition in its original form. And we do that, we should be doing that periodically. So if we document something now, in the next 3 years, we document the same thing. And then we can observe the changes. But what's very important is to make sure that the people of St. Kitts maintain their cultural tradition as original as possible, so that the next generation will know it in its original state.
Right.
So,
So-
it's you can't stop it from changing. You can't stop young people from putting their spin on it, modernizing it. But there's always something that is tradition, and you should be able to practice it or perform it in its traditional state, and then also observe the new transformations that are occurring.
Yes.
But once the community respects the authenticity, well, not authenticity, but the original integrity of
Okay,
the
so
art
there is
form.
cultural assimilation taking place.
Yes.
But at the very same time, who is responsible for cultural reproduction? You spoke about the sports and way back then and our grandparents and
Yeah.
so on.
Yeah.
And that now we have a new generation of young people who may not be as familiar with what took place then. How is culture preserved, reproduced throughout the ages,
Okay, well,
the years?
Well, first of all, I'll say that culture is maintained through our people. It's maintained in the community. It lives and thrives in the community. If we didn't have the practitioners who have a love for the art form, who love, and I'm going to keep making a reference to the folklore because I know that nationally everybody's very familiar with that, and it's the best example to explain it. But if those individuals did not have a love for what they do, nobody hired them and said, you've got to do this. They joined when they were young. They were taught by the expert in that field, and for the love of it, they have continued it. So they come from the community. So culture stays alive in the community. We meaning Department of Culture, we can never dictate what culture is.
Yes.
We observe, we preserve it, and we share it. That's our role.
Right.
But
So culture is learned, culture is shared,
and handed down from
culture is adaptive.
Yeah, but it's handed down from generation to generation. That's how it's transferred.
And handed down.
Yes.
Just to support.
But that's one thing. The learning and the sharing and the adapting and so on. But of greater import or greater attention are the meaning systems, the values and beliefs behind all of that.
and that
And the interpretation of all of that.
If I'm permitted to jump in to support what Marlene was saying, Lesroy, using the folklore, and this is a case in point. We've started a program where, to have the sustainability of the folklore, we are doing folklore in the primary schools with the help of the Doctor of Culture, Mr. Winston Zach Nisbet, MH,
Yes.
and we are very grateful for his support and assistance. And in 2016, we had the Maka Jumbes in the Sandy Point Primary School and the Charles E. Mill Secondary School. They, within short time, they were actually performing the skills. When they came to Bastia for the carnival, they were wearing the traditional conical hats and the skirts, because
Yes.
that's the indigenous attire, so to speak, of the Maka Jumbes. And the persons were really laughing after them, because they're comparing them now, like Marlene said, the changes to the current Maka Jumbes, where you're going to see them in red and green and gold and the national colors and all kind of things. And so then they felt bad. So they actually lost the hats and they lost the skirts, because now they were being compared to the modern day Maka Jumbes, as it were, which would have evolved, so to speak. But at the end of the day, the traditional messages, the traditional dances should really be intact, at least. But however, there are going to be a little bit of changes. When we look at music, we have fusion, reggae and dancehall and soca and all kind of things. So persons are attempting to express themselves differently with the fusing of different music, different styles. And that is part of what we have to maintain. What is the originality of it, the foundation? So though it may change, we still know where it was, what it is supposed to be.
Right,
like-
and I think that's where the whole meaning systems come into play. Because something might change, you know, the formed, but the meaning, the core, remains the same.
Why you do what you do.
Why you do what you do.
And-
In other words, what does this mean? What does it mean?
But as rightfully so, what Mr. Mills said, the foundation, you must always have your foundation, you know, and even in dance, it's the same thing.
The core.
You have foundation movements, but there's a whole bunch of creativity when a choreographer creates something derived from that foundation. So, you know, we don't have a problem with change and evolution. However, we must understand both. We must know the foundation and know that, okay, this has changed, you know. Mansion Bull, as long as we've known, the bull is red and white, is represented by red and white. However, I've seen a bull costume, I believe it comes from Keon, black and white. One half white, one half black. Now somebody visiting St. Kitts and not understanding the folklore tradition would say, oh, the bull is black and white. But that's, you know, but we know, traditionally the people of St. Kitts know that it's originally supposed to be red and white. So
Yes.
there's room for change once you understand the foundation. And going forward, when you transfer that knowledge to the next generation, you must teach them the foundation.
Yes, because
First.
it is in the foundation that
That's
you're
critical.
going to find the values and the beliefs. What you see is one thing. The dress is one thing. The music is one thing. You know, the food is one thing. The way of, you know, that we raise our children, for example, that's one thing. But what are the underlying values and beliefs that are there? The meaning systems. That's what I'm really getting at, because, you know, it at the end of the day, yes, the dress is important, you know, the dance is important, and all of that. But what is it teaching us as a people? And how is it really helping us to develop as a people in society? And you know, yes.
Well,
Yeah, it's sort of like the parable of the pig in the palace, unfortunately. But the question is, because we can cook pasta, does that make us Italian?
No.
So, likewise, what the discussion here is, because we can dance masquerade, that does not necessarily make us Kittitian, Nevisian. And I think that Marlene is sort of bringing that out, in that saying that yes, we are keeping alive the practice, but we also understand that that practice has inherent in it values, an understanding of what you do, why you of why you do what you do.
Mm-hmm.
So it is a combination of the practice, but the values, when certain persons do things, think of it this way: we all do it. Our family members, or whatever, somebody does something, and you say, "Boy, girl, why you doing that?" You know, it ain't so it go. You know, it ain't so it go, boy. But people
That's
from
not how
St.
you do
Kitts
it.
don't do so. It and by saying that, what we are saying is the value system does not support why you are doing what you are doing.
Right. For the vast majority of the people as well.
Right, because we also have to bear in mind that this is why there is such a term. What did Lord Funny say the true meaning of the word? Deviance. Because this is why there is a word such as deviance. Because there are persons that deviate from practices for different reasons. Some of them good and some of them unfortunately not so good.
Yes. Now, did you want to add something, Marlene, before I move on?
I was just going to say that, you know, the reference that Mr. Knight made in terms of how would somebody recognize that something is not, it's not how Kittitians do this. It's by witnessing tradition. You know, by understanding the tradition of the culture of the people, you recognize subtle differences that are not part of the norm. You know, what you normally recognize or classify as a Kittitian expression or mannerism or style of dress. You can see the influence and recognize that it's not traditionally part of the culture. You know, I'm not sure if you're going into intangible cultural heritage, or maybe I'll pause.
Pause. We are going
And
to
at a later-
we are going to get to there.
Okay.
She's anxious to get in there.
The culture is so important that we need a policy.
Yes, we do.
And we're going to talk a bit about the policy. It is my understanding that we now have a draft revised national cultural policy.
That is most correct.
Yes. Why was it necessary to revise the policy? In what consists the revisions, and what are the pillars on which this revised cultural policy is erected?
Based on our previous discussion here this afternoon, people have different ways of doing things for whatever reasons. And what we found out at the Department of Culture is that, one, some persons have the wrong idea of what our culture is, what we are all about. And two, some persons don't necessarily have any idea what it is all about. And I don't know if I'll be fair in saying rightfully so, because of how you would have been taught. Obviously, if you don't know something, you're going to teach it how you know. And if you know something wrong, you're going to teach it how you know still. And back in 2010, the services of Mr. Sidney Bartley from Jamaica was sought, and he produced a draft document in about 2011, 2012. And nothing had really been done for the last few years. And then that was through the help of UNESCO, Mr. Antonio Mena, the Secretary General of the St. Kitts Nevis Commission, and we must compliment him and UNESCO for the work they have been doing. And we again sought the services through UNESCO of an expert, and this time it was Dr. Keith Nurse from Trinidad and Tobago, a fellow of different boards, well, an expert in the field. And last year he was here. We had some interviews, meeting some stakeholders, and he was able to go back, put a draft together, and it's before us now, and we are actually activating the final steps. So we'll be able to put the draft policy at the table of the Deputy Prime Minister to hopefully be tabled in Parliament shortly thereafter. And in a nutshell, it basically will be saying what the people can expect of culture and what the culture expects of the people, not necessarily the government, not the Department of Culture, because culture is not my thing, it's not your thing, it's not the Department of Culture, it's not the government's thing. Culture is really our thing, we the people. And everybody, the man on the street who maybe he doesn't really care about culture, maybe he doesn't know, but he needs to have a voice.
He's
and
a part
input
of culture.
Yeah, because it will affect
Culture is in him.
It will affect him, and he will affect the culture. So it's important to have that broad perspective and involvement and document things, because if we don't, you and I could have a meeting and we discuss AB, but we go away and you're remembering we discuss BC, and it's problematic. So once we have a policy, something written, something with teeth, something with legs, not just to put down on my desk and, oh, that's it, I'll put down on Mr. Nice's desk or the minister's desk as it is, but something that would shape us as a people. And so we could really stand up and say, hey, I'm a Kitisha Nivijan from a cultural policy point of view.
Okay. Now, Mr. Knight, maybe you can speak a bit to the revisions and the pillars on which the policy is erected.
The original policy was found to be very focused on what the Department of Culture and the government does in relation to the preservation and promotion of culture. For instance, some of the original pillars, such as set out the positions and approaches the government intends to promote in the quest to promote national cultural development. That is just an example. Another one, identify the plans, programs and activities that government intends to promote in the effort to achieve the various goals and objectives.
Yes.
So it was very focused. It was focused more on creating strategic initiatives for the Department of Culture and not necessarily looking holistically at what culture means to the person walking down the road. How does it benefit our communities? How do our practitioners access the benefits of cultural practice? And to a large extent, how does our practice, our cultural practices and our heritage, tangible and intangible, how does that position us in the world? So what we, in the revised version, therefore, there are, I think, seven pillars. Seven pillars. One is to promote national identity through the documentation, coordination, and promotion of cultural values, practices, and mores. So this now is what we talk about, the person on the road being able to identify with it. The second is to promote the cultural sector as a vehicle of social development. And earlier we spoke about the value systems and the norms and the things that we now know that we can say to a person, well, you know, this is not right, because it's our cultural practices now becoming ingrained into our communities.
Yes.
Then target the cultural and creative industries as an area of major economic activity.
Which we will speak about, Marlene.
Yes, because let us be realistic. The entertainment industry, the tourism industry, all of those are to a large extent driven through the professional practice of culture, and this is a multi-trillion-dollar industry worldwide. So that is the reality of that. Then preserve, protect, and promote our national intangible and tangible cultural heritage. And one of the things that we are proud that we can say with pride is that St. Kitts is signatory to all of the UNESCO convention, including the protection of cultural heritage, both tangible and intangible, and also the convention which seeks to prevent the trafficking, the illegal trafficking of cultural artifacts, because there is a lot of that. We know that we have heard the stories of persons diving off of St. Kitts and finding a shipwreck and basically bringing stuff up and taking it outside the borders of St. Kitts. That is now an international prosecutable crime, and we are signatories to that. So,
but you know what? I'll say this, and I think some of those metropolitan countries, of course, which were colonies at one time,
yes.
They have been guilty of a lot of that. When I went to England just the other day, I saw so many things in museums, and I asked myself, where did they get them?
Well, they
were taken from the people.
They were taken. They were taken, and
Yes.
and here is what, and there now has been, especially when it comes to the Egyptian artifacts, there have been several test cases. I know there's been a test case in New York, there's been one in Paris, there's been one in Beijing, where they have identified artifacts as Egyptian artifacts, and they had to not only be returned to the Egyptian government, but the Egyptian government also was compensated. So it is a question now of access, to be able to access to courts, and because we all know, regardless of what we say about justice, justice does have a price tag, and and very often, unfortunately, the access to court is sometimes limited by your own, financial resources.
Can I just add to
Yes.
what you're saying? In a broader sense, what Mr. Knight is speaking about is actually a form of reparation. So when people think of reparations, they think of money. Yes, that might be a part of it for assets taken, in the wrong manner. However, reparations can be returning the traditional artifacts of a country or of a people. So just to let the public know that that
Yes.
can be reparations as well. But you have to, delicate negotiations, the reciprocal means, even though it rightfully belongs to, a people, it's not in your possession. So, that's where negotiations and discussions, and that's where we let our foreign affairs,
Yes.
advise accordingly
right.
and move forward.
And while I know that it was not on the docket, Your Honor, when we speak to reparations, often persons don't understand. And at first, I can raise my hand that said I didn't fully comprehend until I heard a comedian, and we know that we have some pretty serious comedians these days, and they said, to understand reparation, if someone was kidnapped at birth and they were raised with the kidnappers, and 20 years later they were discovered, that kidnapper would still go to jail. It's one. And we understand Stockholm syndrome and all of those, where the person has been raised into seeing their kidnapper as a source of security and etc., etc., etc. So, but here is where we have generations of persons who were kidnapped from other countries. And hundreds of years later, the kidnappers are now saying, but you know, you can't really expect us to pay.
Yeah.
But they were kidnapped.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, and when he said it, he actually made the joke. He says, you know, I never saw any African country send any Marines over to try to, you know, rescue the kidnapped persons over in America. But, right. And
So
to
we move on to
right,
we've
move on.
looked at 4 so far.
Right.
We move on to the 5th one.
Right. The 5th one is establish the links between the cultural policy and other national policies and legislation to achieve the goals and objective of the national cultural policy. Now, we must understand that, for instance, education has a policy, sports has a policy, tourism has a policy, agriculture has a policy, health has a policy, and all of those things speaks to, again, as we talk, how we live, how should I put it, how we identify how we identify ourselves. I had to laugh. The last World Cup, somebody looked and said, but me, I'm here. France playing like Brazil and Brazil playing like France. That is why France won. Now, what they did is that they looked at the free-flowing, easy boxing, triangles, the creation and this and thing of and they said that is the Brazilian style of football. Why? Because its style of football is actually a cultural thing. So we need to understand that whether it be sports, whether it be tourism and how we promote our practices, agriculture, what we plant and how we use our lands, all of those things, all of those other national policies, we must have a synthesis of all national policies
Yes.
to the optimum benefit of our people. So that's the
Yeah, but you know, policy is good.
yes.
But it is no good if one is dormant or dead, or if it's not implemented and people know anything about it. So one thing, you're going to have a cultural policy and you're going to have a sports policy and it sounds good and so on, but the implementation of that policy is another step
Right. And we're going to speak
to
to that.
really bring that policy,
Yes.
you know, alive. Otherwise, it's of no
Right.
import really.
And we're going to speak to that shortly after. However, and my mom used to have a saying, you know, the old saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. She says, you think so? And just throw some salt in the horse face. He said, you'd be amazed at how, he says, at how urgent water becomes
Yes.
for that horse. He says, so maybe sometimes our practices, unfortunately, sometimes people need to, as we just say, suck salt a little bit in order to become motivated to move forward on certain things. And then we have to ratify and create linkages between the cultural policy and regional and international agreements and conventions. And we spoke,
Yes.
you know, a bit of that. And then the last one, and this is important, and I like to end, this is a good note because it also speaks to some of the work, some of the great work that is already happening within the Department of
Yes.
Culture. And the last one is conduct research and measurement of the socio-economic contribution of the creative and cultural industry. And I would like to take this opportunity to highlight the work that Marlene and the Department of Culture has been doing, which I
Okay.
think is excellent work
Good.
so far.
Now, what we are seeing, of course, coming out of that policy is, you know, how important culture is to the social, economic, and sustainable development of any society, of any people, or peoples. In fact, no development can be sustainable without culture. And that is why, of course, the Sustainable Development Goals, the UN SDGs as they call them, for 2030, in Goal 11, speaks to making cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. It calls for strengthening efforts to protect and safeguard the world's cultural and natural heritage. How are we contributing to that goal, Marlene?
In my own opinion, I think St. Kitts and Nevis is doing quite well, with little assistance in terms of preserving its natural resources and positioning itself globally to be able to provide an environment that welcomes sustainability when you're looking at tourism. And we know that without culture, there really isn't any tourism, because what are the people going to see and consume and partake of if not the culture of the society, that the country that you're visiting? So there are things happening. I'll say it's a little bit fractured, but again, with the National Cultural Policy, we're hoping to find those linkages of commonality between the different departments so that we can work together to reach, the same goals.
Yes, I think you have made an extremely good point in terms of how culture links with other, other areas within the society. For example, you mentioned culture, the link between culture and tourism, but not just tourism, but tourism cannot be sustained without culture.
Right.
That's correct.
So
work
the
together.
culture
Yes.
and sustainable tourism, and I
Yes.
think that UNESCO has a World Heritage and Sustainable Tourism Program,
Yeah.
right? Which is a new approach, of course, based on dialogue and stakeholder cooperation. We are planning for tourism, and heritage management is integrated at a destination level. The natural and cultural assets are valued and protected, and appropriate tourism developed.
And one thing
So-
that we can't leave out are the people. The communities are going to either make it a success or a failure, because the people, remember, the people are who make the culture. So you have to involve people in the community. You have to look at what the community values as important. And it's not, and with tourism, it's not just saying, okay, what would a tourist like to see? We have to flip it around and say, what does the community value as a part of its culture? Let's safeguard it, and let's share it with those who come to see, because we believe that it's fantastic, and people that come and visit like to engage in whether it be the festivities, the food, the language of the culture. So first and foremost, people in the community, we need to have, so I would say sort of like a new mentality of we've got to speak to the communities and involve them. It takes a little bit of a longer process. However, the community is able to be a part of the decision making, and also to benefit from what's happening in tourism. You have people all over the country in St. Kitts and Nevis that are very skilled and talented with traditional skill sets. I'm not just speaking about craft, but I'm speaking about performance, speaking about the culinary arts, foods, traditional foods that they produce for themselves and the love of their community. And then when someone comes and visit, they can partake of that and experience a little bit of Kitchener Division culture.
Yes.
So the community is instrumental, and we have to have that dialogue with people in the community. And I think also there are probably some people that still don't understand how tourism can benefit them directly. And it does have to do with sustainability. At Culture, we're trying to get people to think about what business, what skill set do you have, what business can you do, to sustain yourself that has a cultural or a creative spin to it. If you're good at making a craft or you're good at cooking certain foods, have you thought about running your own business? And not necessarily just running your business in town, but how about in the community in which you live?
Yes.
And drawing the visitor into your community because you have something of traditional value or cultural value that, you want to share with other people. And then that brings tourism and increases the economic activity within your village. You understand? So tourism does have its role in bringing that consumer.
And I have seen it because if we're speaking about culture in terms of protecting and safeguarding our natural heritage and all of that, it simply means, our rainforests and our beaches and all of that must be protected and safeguarded. So therefore we have to really reduce any sort of activity that would destroy our natural heritage. For example, our beaches.
Yeah.
Our the ocean, and I see that being done by tourism recently in terms of the Plastic-Free July.
Yes. Excellent initiative.
Excellent,
By the Sustainable
excellent
Development
initiative.
Council.
So I think what we want to develop is a culture in which you speak that is sustainable. Going along with tourism as well, we have to think in terms of the environment.
Yes.
Our natural environment, our natural heritage and so on. How do we protect and how do we preserve it? How do we safeguard it? And to get into people's minds that this must become something, it must be inculcated into us. It must become a part of our culture to protect and to safeguard.
That's part of what the Sustainable Destination Council is doing. They formed a committee which involves different people from different sectors of civil society to look at these things, to look at the synergies, and to make sure that we're protecting these areas, natural resources, and that development that's happening, with buildings being built and residences and expansion of that. Almost like a bit of a watchdog, but working in partnership with developers to say, wait a minute, your development's going through, but please be aware that these are the rules and regulations and policies that we have in St. Kitts and Nevis put there to protect certain natural resources that need to remain for the survival of the people. You understand? So it's that kind of conversation, and it's about making sure that everyone's livelihood is good without destroying those resources in your environment. So it's a way of thinking. It's kind of holistic, but it's a retraining of how we do things. If you're going to build, you don't just think about, okay, I'm going to knock down all those trees. We're hoping that people will say, okay, what kind of trees are those? Are they protected in St. Kitts and Nevis?
Yes.
Does the policy protect them? Is it the flamboyant tree? And that's a good example.
So we have to think cultural preservation.
Absolutely. The flamboyant is a national flower, correct?
That's right.
So the question would be, well, what are the policies that protect that? Because it's a national flower, can you just go down and chop down a flamboyant tree? Are there, repercussions for doing that? And does everybody in the country know that and respect it? And as well as people who are investing here and becoming residents, and everybody must abide by those policies because why? It's important and it's valued by the people of the country.
Yes.
So it's those kinds of things, and safeguarding is just to make sure that we don't run out of things. We don't run out of that plant or run out of that tradition or run out of that resource for the future.
Right. Normally in creative industries and cultural infrastructure are valuable resources for generating livelihoods. Can you update us on the St. Kitts Nevis creative industry? What's
Well-
happening there?
Well, it's something that Ms. Tashiela Millington, who is our assistant research and documentation specialist, and this is her area of expertise, is designated with recruiting, promoting information about the registry, which stands for St. Kitts and Nevis Creative Industry Registry, which basically is meant to be a database that we're hoping to fill with all of the cultural workers in the creative industry. So that the same way you have a Yellow Pages, but this is digitally on the internet, a website, you should be able to go there, put in the name of somebody or put in a service that you're looking for, and whoever's registered should pop up a page with their information, their contact number. So that's our goal. And it's been a slow process to get people to register. I think it's just a cultural thing. We are hesitant to become a part of something. We're suspicious, but I can guarantee that the benefit of being part of the registry is many benefits, and it's the first one is free advertising. When you register, you're given a page that is your page to promote your skill or service. And you can put your pictures up there, your video links, you can put information. We ask you for a bio to explain what is the skill or service or product you're providing, your contact information, email address. So we're not stopping anyone from contacting you, but we're making it easier for people to find you. And then you can manage your page and update it at your will. So that's the first benefit. The other benefit, and we keep trying to build different layers into it, which obviously takes time, but we've been communicating with Ministry of Trade, and everybody knows about duty free, okay?
Yes.
And that seems to be when culture is kind of remembered, when duty free is happening. But we're saying that we're trying to support our cultural workers in the creative sector,
Yeah,
in that
and that's-
instance in particular. And again, being a member of the registry, if you go to Ministry of Trade, for example, and maybe you have not registered your business officially in the official way, and maybe you want to move your business throughout the Caribbean through CARICOM, you would have to apply for something called a skills certificate.
Yes.
Now, the skills certificate asks that individual, do you belong to an agency? Most people don't who are in the creative sector, but if you're a member of the SKNCIR, we are considered an agency. So that, again, you get endorsed by the Department of Culture, and Ministry of Trade is really looking for some kind of corroboration that you are who you say you are, and you do what you say you do. I think we have kind of like a misnomer here in the creative industry that everybody knows who I am, they know what I do. I sing, or I play in this band, or, but I will tell you, shamefully, in 2018, when I search on Facebook for certain popular bands, musicians, service providers, I don't see a phone number that's accurate. I don't see a correct email that I can get in touch with. I don't see a bio. And so it makes it hard for us to contact you if we can't find you. So that's what this registry does. Accurate information. We just go there, we can find you, contact you immediately. So there's that misunderstanding where everyone thinks everyone knows everybody. I think it's maybe just by the mere small size of the federation. So we're encouraging people to consider it. Free advertising gives you credibility. It's isolating your creative skill. And we have to recognize that cultural workers tend to consider their skill, service, or products a hobby and not as a mainstream. And most cultural workers, again from our observation and research, have another job and they do that on the side. But we're trying to encourage them to still formalize the service that you're doing. Do it professionally and think of it like a business and make yourself available in a business manner.
Yes.
People in the private sector, they have signage, they've got business cards, they advertise in the Yellow Pages. You can find them. You call them, they pick up the phone, and you know what I mean? You get someone on the end, or you get a message, you leave a message, I'll get back to you. We're trying to share best practices with our cultural workers, and we're doing that through the registry.
I'm happy that you mentioned that, because I think one of the things that has to be done is to strengthen trade in cultural goods and services. And in that way, you're providing some impetus for the local and national markets, and which in turn provides employment opportunities for people, especially for decent work, as part of the United Nations SDGs.
Absolutely. I mean, I would tell you, we haven't done a survey per se of the creative industries, but I think it's in the works. But the registry will give us some data, definitely from people who are registering. And we know, let's just say nationally, we all have a gut feeling that the creative industries is making money. The products and the services, I mean, every day, every month out of the year, there's something culturally happening. Whether it's something happening in a village, like we've got National Carnival, we've got Culturama coming up in Nevis, but there's some activity that is cultural happening, and that involves stage production, it involves graphic designers, performers, videographers to document, people that do stages, costuming, clothing, hair, nails, makeup. Those are all a part of the creative sector, right? So we have to acknowledge that it is separate and apart from the normal mainstream business, which is your doctor, dentist, lawyer, etc. And we really need to gather our statistics to demonstrate that culture in the creative industries does generate money. Yes. And to make money, you've got to invest money. And we're hoping that's what the policy will do, is to make everyone understand what is required to support the growth and expansion and development of the creative sector financially.
Yes. Did you want to add to what she was saying?
Two key points you mentioned, CARICOM, and you mentioned the registry. As recently as in June, Mr. Knighton, myself, and Jerome Wallins, the Chief Executive Officer of the Nevis Cultural and Development Foundation, we attended a regional cultural committee meeting, which is basically directors of culture, the permanent secretaries, etc., in Guyana. And representation was at that meeting from UNESCO. UNESCO, through CARICOM, they're interested in quite a few things, but two things that they keep asking about is, one, the cultural policies in countries, and two, your registry. And that is something, especially with our CARIFORA partnership with the EPA, etc. And you mentioned the exchange, because Europe, they're looking at other markets to have that exchange, and the Caribbean, obviously, through CARICOM, we are being looked at. And that was key. How far are you with your cultural policy? How far are you with your registry? And there are only two countries, I think it is, in the Caribbean, is it Trinidad and is it Jamaica, who have their policies in place already. And we were actually commended for the work we're doing and how far we are.
They have already gone to the parliament and everything.
Yes. So when we get there shortly, we'll be updating very, very, very few in the Caribbean. And that is something important that they have been driving. And again, the references to each of us. It's not just a policy with St. Kitts Nevis, but how do we relate to the other Caribbean countries and even in Europe, the European Union.
Yes, Mr. Knight.
Right. Also, as you mentioned earlier, no policy is worth anything if it sits. So what we have already done is that we have already articulated a follow-up project under the 2005 Cultural Diversity Convention.
Yes.
And the purpose of that project, which we hope to begin delivering next year, is in the not just the creation, but to make the strategic plan which comes out of the cultural policy actionable for 2 years. Included in it is, as Marlene, suggested, education. And as Troy said, promotion. Because persons must be aware of this. That is one. Persons must know of what benefit it is to them. Persons must know how to access, because often it's, you know, it's that persons know that this is good, this is something good, and it's something good for them, but they do not know how to access the benefits that are entailed within there. So part of that whole thing, things such as the development of, at the community level, of cultural practices and art forms, all of that is ingrained now within the cultural diversity strategic initiative, so that you know, so that we are planning step 2, step 3 going forward.
Yeah, I think it is extremely important for people to understand that when you speak about benefits, it is not just about economic benefits.
Truth.
It's about social cohesion, the development of our values, our belief system that really holds us together. Because it's one thing to sing and to think, well, look, I am just singing because I'm in it for the money. Or I am just dancing because I am in it for the money. But how am I really contributing to social development and cultural development? These are things that we have to think about.
And it's important what you mentioned, Lesroy, because most of our, especially our folklorists, Marlene love that, because everybody could relate to it. We're really doing it on a, we're not doing it full-time, part-time basis. Here and there we make a little change. And we mentioned earlier that it's an integral part of the tourism plan, because when the tourism department, the ministry, they go out and they're advertising St. Kitts Nevis, they're really advertising the experience or experiences you could have in St. Kitts Nevis, which are different and unique to Barbados, St. Martin, Anguilla, wherever. And it redounds to that cultural experience, the food, the drink, the liming. You find tourists, they'll go in the circus and they drink a coconut, they drink coconut water from the coconut, because that is our thing. They want to feel part of us, they want to be like us for that small moment. And a lot of us perhaps afraid to step into that area on a full-time basis, and hopefully when we have the policy in place, it will support that. And like Mr. Knight has been saying, it will help to show you the benefits that could be derived, and with the support of the Department of Culture, how we could better prepare you to benefit from this. And ultimately, when you do, the country benefits, because Marlene mentioned GDP. The cultural landscape contributes immensely to GDP. It's a discussion what percentage it is, which we are working towards determining, and
Yes.
we will shortly.
Good. Now we have to move on. Time is going by so quickly. But maybe you can differentiate, I'm going back to Marlene, between, we hear about tangible and intangible culture. So if you can differentiate, can you update us on the UNESCO Intangible Cultural Heritage Project? And you recently were in Paris, beautiful city, for the UNESCO International Cultural Heritage Assembly. Could you tell us what were some of the key points coming out of that assembly?
Well, intangible cultural heritage has to do with practices, again, rituals, practices that are valued by the people in the community, basically. And as I mentioned before, that's expressed sometimes through performance, social practices and activities, festivities, as well as, foods that you eat, the natural environment and resources. And the meeting that happened in June, at the beginning of June, basically happens every 2 years. St. Kitts and Nevis is signatory to the 2003 Intangible Cultural Heritage Convention of UNESCO. And every 2 years, there is a meeting that's held in Paris at the headquarters for UNESCO. And at this meeting, basically it's looking at the convention. There are different working groups that happen during the course of the year that address certain questions that would arise from activities that are happening within the convention, and certain changes. You know, it's the convention exists, but by using the convention, you know, different countries who are member states, they're discovering different things or challenges and make recommendations. So basically, when these things are discovered or expressed by member states, the Intergovernmental Committee
Yes.
for ICH, they review them, and then they're tabled at this meeting every 2 years. And then all the member states have an opportunity to, you know, to vote on it, to agree, disagree, discuss, tweak, improve. And basically that's what happened. And so we have the results, or we will get the results, they'll be posted, of things that were voted for, in agreement of. And in my small summary, because it's very, very detailed and it's quite lengthy, the documents that we have to go through. But basically, there were improvements made to the convention. You know, there was an observation that there was an underutilization of people or member states applying for the ICH fund, and looking at, well, why is that? And what are some of the things that can be done to make it easier to access, etc. And so nationally for St. Kitts and Nevis, we are writing a proposal, or have written a proposal and are tweaking it to safeguard St. Kitts and Nevis intangible cultural heritage. And in April, we had a consultant from UNESCO, Nigel Encalada, who originates from Belize and is an expert in ICH. He came over and has been working with Pauline Ngunjuri, who is the acting executive director of the Nevis Cultural Heritage Society, and myself as the St. Kitts focal point. And we met with different stakeholders to talk about the convention, to understand what ICH is and understand what safeguarding is, and what opportunities there are for us now that we're members of the convention. And we met with different stakeholders, but ultimately the proposal that we're going to submit is going to be a 2-year proposal that we're hoping will begin next year. And we have yet to submit it, but we're still fine-tuning it, because I want people to understand that from the time when Nigel was here, Nigel Encalada, that we've been in dialogue with him via Skype, via WhatsApp, and we've submitted drafts to him. His services is to review 3 drafts of our submission, because he's guiding us, and we're learning. He's teaching us, because we're building capacity nationally. So that now, with Pauline having this understanding of what the process is, and myself here, now other people that want to apply for this fund, we can guide them. We know what's involved, and we know what they're looking for. And again, we are learning this from the consultant. And so, you know, we're very close to submitting it, but we have one more step to go, because the project that we're writing is like in 4 phases. The first phase, we want to identify 25 people, 15 in St. Kitts, and 10 would help me in Nevis. My math, the bright lights in Nevis are going to be trained to understand the Intangible Cultural Heritage Convention and what's involved and the opportunities available. And then we're going to get those 15 people to recruit 25 in St. Kitts, and I think it was 20 in Nevis, and they must be a part of the training. So the people that get trained from the community in the ICH will be part of the training of the other people who are recruited. Remember, we're building capacity. We have to sensitize people so they understand what ICH is. And then the next phase is going to be training them with certain skill sets to do research. So they're going to learn, you know, a certain number in St. Kitts and Nevis are going to be learning how to operate a camera, audio recorder, conduct interviews, as well as input the data on an archiving software. So again, skill sets are being delivered to people in the community. Now there is a method to our madness, because we want to utilize the same group from the same 50 from the beginning, and they'll get trained through all of the phases. So they will really have some good skills that we can utilize to do research and to create the safeguard this ICH in St. Kitts and Nevis, as well as now they've got additional skills that they can go into the workforce, or, you know, and maybe get different jobs with these new skill sets. So we're trying to build up our capacity to do this work, because Department of Culture, we're very small. We don't have a fleet of 50 people to go out and do it for us, so we're depending upon the community to work with us.
Good.
The next phase that's going to happen after we do the training is we're actually going to be doing a pilot inventorying in St. Kitts and Nevis. And this is where we create 10 teams in St. Kitts, 6 teams in Nevis, each comprising of 3 people, a team leader, a documentalist, and a researcher. And they're going to go out and do the field work and gather the information from the community, talk to people, interview them, and say that, okay, this community says that, Mr. Brown makes mabi. And we think that this is something that should be protected because there's only 3 people in the country that make it. So at the end of that whole process, we'll have this list coming from the community of what is valued. And we'll submit that list to UNESCO. And then the next part of what we would do is safeguard it. How do you safeguard it? Again, I'll go back to the folklore. In St. Kitts and Nevis, we have, in need of urgent safeguarding, the mummies, the actors, and the Makajumbi. I think each of them have at least one group in the country. That's scary, because if all of them said today, I'm tired, me not work, that's it, your folklore is gone. You've lost the mummies, the actors, the Makajumbi. So safeguarding is handing on that tradition. So we're hoping to, and it's been happening already, working with the tradition bearers, who are the ones that have the knowledge, and training the next generation, doing training workshops, going into the schools, and engaging children at primary level to understand their folklore, their cultural heritage, because again, that fosters self-pride, national pride. And if you're not introduced to it at a young age, then when you're older and you're a teen, you don't have no
more
interest.
difficult.
Yeah, you have no interest. So
Now
those are
we
some
have
of
to
the
go to the
things.
phone lines
Yes.
and take a few calls. But I understand all that you're saying, especially intangible cultural heritage is really an important factor in maintaining cultural diversity,
Yes.
especially in this age of globalization.
Absolutely.
Right.
And
So
I know you went to the phone line, but the most important thing to remember is we must respect our cultural diversity.
yes,
Right? We're not, we respect each other's culture, and that's the key. It's okay to be different, but don't disrespect another person's culture.
right. And we must be culturally sensitive. We are going to open the phone lines. The numbers to call, the local number is 465-2555. That's the local number. And the overseas number is 1-718-577-2916. That is 1-718-577-2916. We welcome your calls. Now, how are cultural projects, for example, funded? I know you mentioned before, you alluded to it, that we need some money, really.
We need a lot of money.
A lot of money, plenty money.
I'm not going to be embarrassed about it. We need a lot of money, because when we're talking about, we've all been talking about these massive, this massive development that culture needs, from policy to creative industries to infrastructure and all of that. And it takes manpower, In our Department of Culture, we're lacking human resources to execute some of these things. Again, that's why we have to rely upon the community. And in the project I'm speaking about, we have to build stipends into that budget that we're asking for funding, because, for
There's
the work
a caller on the line, Marlene.
for the work.
Sorry to cut you
Okay.
off. Working for you, good afternoon.
Sorry to cut you too, my sister. Greetings.
Greetings.
Can we ask us a question?
Yes.
What is the national dish of St. Kitts Nevis?
Okay. We are talking here about tangible culture.
Yes. Can we stay online, or can we hang up and listen on the radio?
Okay.
Thank you.
The caller is asking, what is the national dish of St. Kitts and Nevis? Apparently, he's a bit, he doesn't know. What is it?
Go ahead.
I yield to the vote. Those
Okay.
among the thorns.
Saltfish, spicy plantain, coconut dumpling, And am I missing something?
Breadfruit.
Breadfruit.
That is it.
That's it.
Okay. Good. Paul, I hope you're satisfied with that answer.
As simple as it is.
So, as has been said, one of the, how should I put it? Persons need to understand that the development of policy, national cultural policy, the work that is going on in intangible cultural heritage, cultural diversity, it is about national development. And that is it. The first thing about the development of any entity is that entity to be able to define itself. And I'll put it this way.
What do you mean by national development, Mr. Knight? Break it down. What is national development? Because there can be no national development without human development.
Well, I was about to say it. National development, or the development of the nation, the Federation of St. Christopher and Nevis, is multifaceted. Yes, there must be human development, but often human development comes, how should I put it, along with the development of the resources, the infrastructure, the social fabric. We often talk about national development, and yet we know that we do have social problems.
Yes.
So we now need to be able to ask ourselves. So for instance, let's bite the bullet. Sorry to have to use the word bullet, but it is true. Right now we have a crime problem. And often I have seen where some of the solutions that are proffered are to a large extent foreign to us. So the question is, how do we reclaim our streets, street corners, neighborhoods, communities, towns and villages, and a country as a whole? All of that has to do with development, and to a large extent all of that also has to do with culture. Someone related something to me the other day where there was a vacant property within their neighborhood, and there were some let's put it this way, less than tasteful characters who began occupying that thing. The person actually said it came to a head where one night they heard gunshots going off in their neighborhood. So what did they do? Several persons in the neighborhood, they went to the space, they cleaned it up, and they would sit down and they would play dominoes, which, by the way, I don't know if you know that we play dominoes in St. Kitts different from other places in the world. I found that out and I was like, wow. Right? But they played dominoes. Guys would come and they would get the little, quattro, and they play music. And over time, what I found interesting, I asked them, so did those persons move away? They said, some moved away, but some stayed. This talks about the power of practice.
Yes.
We, because before we left our village spaces vacant for persons to come and do mischief in, this was what the village spaces were used for. So without them saying that we will use a cultural we will use a cultural practice to reclaim our neighborhood. That is what they actually did.
Yes. And it goes back, as you said, culture really speaks to values. And it's about what we value. You spoke about the crime problem. But if a man has nothing, he has nothing. He knows he has nothing. The only thing he has is his life. And he doesn't even place any value on that. He doesn't mind losing it. And so therefore he places no value on yours either. How do you deal with that?
We have to dialogue. We have to talk. Again, I got to emphasize community. We need to talk to the people in the community that are having challenges. We need to find out what is it that our young men and women need and they're not getting. Okay? It's not something we can sit at a desk and say, "Oh, this happened," and I think we have to talk to them and find out what their needs are, what are their interests. And in some instances, I've experienced young people who are maybe not on the righteous path, engage them in conversation, and I'm not really surprised, but they have an interest in something cultural and something creative, right? So all I'm saying is that every man has to earn, okay? If they're unable to earn one way, they're going to find another way. So we have to
Yes.
dialogue with our young people and say, what are you interested in? What is the what opportunities are not being provided
Yes.
where you can earn?
Certainly.
What skill sets are missing?
Yes.
You know, we can't say, "Oh, well, you dropped out of school and
Hold
so."
it there, Marlene.
Oh,
We have a
okay.
call.
All right.
Working for you, good afternoon.
Hello.
Yes, we are
Mr.
hearing you.
Williams, Mr. Mills, and Mr. Knight, and the lady there.
Good afternoon.
Well, I don't know if you all realize that we have moved away from a lot of our cultural activities that we grew up on. Like, for instance, when we never had electricity, nobody had no electric light in there. We had lamp and maybe one lamp post in the village. And at night, everybody would gather up and we play many games like dodging hoop, hiding hoop. Then we sit down, we talk Nancy's story. And when we have light, we play Ludo, domino, draft, and all kind of thing. Those are some of our basic cultural activity. And we have moved away from them. And we have to talk about them, let the younger people know how it used to be in our days. We ain't had no time for no foolishness like today. So if we could go back to our basic cultural activity, a lot of this foolishness would cut out. So talk about our things what we used to do, please. Those are our cultural activity. Thanks for listening.
Okay. He has made a very good point.
I like what he said. That means that we've got to bridge the gap, the generation gap. Okay, that means our elders and our young people need to talk, have a conversation, or opportunities need to be created for them to engage each other. If we recognize, okay, they're growing apart, and maybe times are changing. Parents have 2-3 jobs, not enough time to hang and talk with the children or what have you. So we have to create opportunities within the community to bring those generations together to experience that. And a young person is going to say, "Oh, that's old people thing," but at least you want them to respect it. You're not saying that, we did this, so you must do that, but acknowledge that it had a place and don't disrespect it. And as well as the elders acknowledging that it's a new generation, new time, and there are going to be different things that interest them. However, there are ways that it can be married and an old pastime can be shared with a young person in an interesting way.
I remember we used to play when I was growing up, police and stealers and all of that. And in some way, the persons who stole, they had done something wrong and they're running away and the police go and catch them and all of that sort of a thing, teaching you really that you must not steal. And people used to pitch marbles, and I don't see anybody pitching marbles now and that sort of a thing. They're firing gun.
Chafing nuts.
Right.
Zib zab zabin.
Okay.
but we're almost out of time. But there are two things I want to touch on before we go. Where is the Federation in terms of its bid on the UNESCO Intangible Cultural Heritage Committee? Where are we in terms of that? And sports is a part of our culture. It's a part of our way of life. In fact, right now they have something at Warner Park. They have any tonight? I'm not even up to date. Last night, and West Indies won.
And we
I
won,
that
yeah.
much I know by 7 wickets.
Don't say West Indies won.
Seven
We won.
wickets.
We won.
We won by
Yeah.
7 wickets. I saw that on BBC by here. I wasn't there. And where are we in terms of the national sports policy? Those two things.
Right. Well, first of all, in terms of I'll deal with the national sports policy and I'll let you jump in on the other. We have currently received a grant from, again, UNESCO, and we do sing his praises, but I think that the national SecGen of the UNESCO office, Mr. Maynard, Antonio Maynard, he does an excellent job of furthering our interest in culture, in sport, in education, in so many different ways. And we have received a participatory grant from UNESCO. We are in the process of designing the rollout of the initiation of that policy, and we are hoping to be able to deliver a national sports policy within the next 18 months. That is the window that we have set ourselves. We have been operating on a national sports framework of sport for all, sport for development, and sport for excellence. And both UNESCO as well as other international entities such as the International Olympic Committee, they have said that the simplicity yet wide-reaching scope of that pillar, they feel, is an excellent start point, and we hope to be able to build on
Which one,
that.
the pillar, sports for all?
On the 3-pillar foundation. Sorry,
Yes.
not on the pillar, on the foundation with the
Okay.
3 pillars: sport for all, sport for development, and sport for excellence. They feel that it is all encompassing, and they can see where we can build out the necessary rubric for the proper articulation of a sports policy. So we're right now working. We have identified a core group, which I will not identify at this stage because some of them don't even yet know that they're on the core group.
Okay.
It is that new.
You have to ask them first.
Yes. No. We have to tell them first.
Tell them.
Yes. We'll just blow them. Tell them.
Okay.
Yeah. Take the court.
In terms of the committee, we had submitted a bid because there's a rotation every 2 years, and when Marlene attended the meeting at the UNESCO Paris, we submitted a bid for St. Kitts Nevis to be a member on that committee. However, we withdrew it subsequently, and Jamaica, they were able to go through. And we are thinking we're now going to be working towards the next 2 years, 2020, and obviously start campaigning for want of a better expression, indicating why we should be. And so far we have started a little bit of groundwork, and we're getting good reviews at this point. And were we to be successful, I think it's going to be the first time that 2 members from the English-speaking Caribbean would be on it. Cuba, they are retiring because a 2-term you'll have on it, so they are retiring. And obviously we're going to be in discussions with all parties to support. We're not certain at this point who we may be coming up against, but with dialogue that has been coming through a lot this afternoon, dialogue, discussion, and support with Cuba, who is exiting, along with not just the Eastern Caribbean, the OECD, the English-speaking Caribbean, the Latin Americans, South Americans as well, to build support. Why we believe we should be a member, how we could benefit, how we could contribute to actually the whole system. And we believe at this stage it may very well be possible, but we have a lot of work to do, because size and just signing up on it, etc., But we're going to have to have linkages, which are another word that has been coming through,
Yes.
with some of the giants, so to speak, in that area. But we feel confident that we'll be getting on.
Okay, what is being done by the department at there's a lot of community talk we spoke of today. What is really being done by the department to, to sort of, how must I put it, foster culture and,
Well,
community culture being preserved and maintained and so on. I know when I was growing up and so on, we used to have things in the communities, festivals, they used to have folklore in the communities and so on. Something that, over time has been reduced significantly at the community level. We cannot start really talking about national level and national cultural policy without really starting at the community level.
as Mal indicated, that's really where it starts, because in various communities, they are the foundation for the national levels. And over a period of time, we have seen quite a few community festivals, I would say, taking a sabbatical. I don't want to say becoming extinct or dormant, taking a sabbatical. And up to last year, we've seen the revival of one of them, Villagerama. So they're up again this year. We've had two so far for the year, Black Sand Bangalang in Sandy Point and the Green Valley Fest, Easter and Whit respectively. And they have been going strong, showing some improvement. We have a few others coming up, and we know Fishnet Festival in Newtown, that's happening around the Independence time. Shortly after that, we're going to be having St. Peter's Fest and Guy Fest, which is Old Road. They're relatively new. They used to have a Guy Fest jam on Guy Fawkes Night, but they've expanded it to a festival, and we're very proud of them for that. So they're going to be coming October, November, and then we're going to be having the Villagerama coming on thereabout. We're going to be having a meeting with them, because one of the things we want to suggest is that your Juve troops and your parade troops, yes, the costumes cost money, but it's not, you could maximize the investment by, as a Sandy Point group for Juve, you come in and form part of the National Carnival Juve Troop. Your parades, you might have 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever different parade groups and parade. They combine, you come up with a relevant team, and you come and you're represented. I know at one point for Carnival there was actually a judging segment for the community festivals. Once we're going to be having that many festivals coming in, that is something to be considered again. And once you're doing that, because it's also a feeling going, as it were, to the Carnival Calypsonians, young Calypsonians coming through, or even Queen contestants. You're seeing them and you realize, but hold on, I think she'll make a good contestant for the National Swimwear pageant or even the Queen Show pageant.
Sure.
So it's also a good recruitment area for the National Carnival. So we're in full support of it. And obviously, for a tourism point of view, it gives the Ministry of Tourism something to advertise. Come to St. Kitts Nevis on Easter, because you're going to get this festival. Come in September, you're going to get that festival.
Good. I think we're out of time. I give each of you a minute to sort of
Start it.
with Marlene. Marlene, I know a minute is putting it very quite. It's rough for you, right?
Pressure on me now. It's a lot of pressure. I have too many words in my mouth. But I would just like to say thank you to our audience, and thank you for having us on the program. And I hope that our listeners will really come and see us at Department of Culture. If you're in the creative industry, please join the registry. You can join online, skncir.gov.can. If you want to know what activities are happening culturally, take a look at our website, www.culture.gov.can. We have current activities. If you have festivals that are going on and you want promotion, send us a flyer. We'll put it up on our website and on our Facebook page. And we do have quite a lot of viewers, so you will get some publicity. Don't think that nobody looks at our page. We do welcome the support that we have. So you can call us at 467-1396 is our RDU office. And, ask a question if you want to find out more about the SKN ICH project we're working on. You want to get involved eventually, contact us and let us know you have an interest.
Thank you for having us here in terms of the policy. We are going to be having a meeting with the stakeholders the 28th of this month. We have already sent out invitations both in St. Kitts and in Nevis, inviting who we consider stakeholders to come and share their view. We're going to be posting the policy online on our website and also to the various media houses, ZIZ and etc., to make it accessible to the public, because like we said, this is not a document for us at the Department of Culture. It is for every Kittitian and Nevisian at home and abroad, not just here. So the policy is a serious. We would do that. It's a serious thing. We ask everybody to access it, please, to look at it. Any questions? Contact us at the Department of Culture, 467-1396, and we'll be able to walk you through it, because it is something that affects every one of us.
Mr. Knight?
And like my counterparts, thank you. And I would also like to add that since I have had the honor of being the permanent secretary for culture, even outside of the work of the department, I'm constantly approached by persons with some really great ideas. Mr. Mills and I constantly sit down, discuss ideas that persons have come, and there are times when we can invest, there are other times when we can help. So what I would just like to say to persons is that, bearing in mind that as the theme of the ACP Cultures Plus Foundation, no future without culture, don't be afraid to come in, sit down, have a discussion with Mr. Mills, with Marlene, with myself. Just articulate what you are thinking of, any project, anything that you would like, because we really would like to make this about all of it.
Well, I want to thank all of you, Mr. Knight, Mr. Mills, and Marlene. I think it has been a very lively and fruitful discussion on culture. Such a wide area. I think we can sit here for days and just talk about culture. So this program doesn't necessarily do justice to us talking about culture. But anyway, thank you very much for your contribution and for coming on today's program.
Our pleasure.
Thank you, sir.
You have been listening to Working for You. I want to thank our listeners to today's program, those of you who called in and contributed. Thank you very much. We will be back next week for another Working for You program. I am your host, Les Roy Williams. Until then, keep the culture positive.
Working for You. A weekly talk radio program which highlights developments of national interest and the activities of your St. Kitts Nevis government. Join host Les Roy Williams as he presents news, views, reports, and interviews about everything regarding the activities of the Team Unity government and the building of our communities and the development of St. Kitts Nevis. Tune in and call in to interact with your government and share your views regarding the upward forward development of your community and our beautiful Twin Island Federation. Working for You is weekly, every Wednesday live from 1:30 p.m. to 3 p.m. on ZIZ Radio, Win FM, and Sugar City FM with rebroadcasts on participating stations. Working for You.